Recording in progress.
Barney, is there a chance you can leave the echo? All right. Our presenter tonight is Grace, KE8RJU, and we're very excited to have her talk to us about satellites. With that, Grace, you are up.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. As Tim said, my name is Grace. My call sign is KE8RJU, Kilo Echo 8 Romeo Juliet Uniform, and I'm going to be talking about amateur radio satellites. Amateur radio satellites is my passion. That's where I mainly operate. I operate on HF and other modes as well, but amateur radio satellites is my heart, and I was just on a pass before the Zoom call, so that's sort of my passion. A little bit about me. I'm 18 years old. I'm in my second semester of senior year at high school. I was licensed in March of 2021, and I hold an amateur extra class license. Some of the satellite awards I hold just to show how passionate I am about this part of the hobby. I hold ARRL DXCC, ARRL Worked All States, and ARRL VUCC with 150 grids submitted for at this point. 950 grids submitted for at this point, but gaining new grids every day. I am a third generation ham as well. My grandfather, KE8RJU, they are portable right now in Arizona, so stroke 7. And then my dad, KE8DP, my mom, KE8CLP, and my grandma, W8ZJB. So I've been really surrounded by some wonderful mentors that have been able to teach me a lot about this amazing hobby. So I've been surrounded by amateur radio for a long time. As you can see in the photo, that's me at age 1, while my dad was getting into amateur radio satellites himself. So all this time he's been doing amateur radio satellites as well, and I thank him for almost all the knowledge that I have. When you think about amateur radio satellites, you probably think of AMSAT. It's an organization that a lot of people tie with amateur radio satellites. AMSAT is a worldwide group of amateur radio operators who have an active interest in building, launching, and communicating with each other through amateur radio satellites. AMSAT is working on building satellites, launching satellites, and working with schools and universities to put amateur radio on their CubeSats and other satellites. AMSAT's mission is, as I said, have amateur radio satellites up in orbit so that we're able to use them. Currently, they're working on the Golf program, which is goal for a greater orbit and a larger footprint. So they're working on innovating and working with designers and builders and engineering to start the development of tomorrow's satellites. The first amateur radio any amateur radio satellite that has amateur radio on it is called an Oscar. And the first Oscar was built by Lance K6GS Golf Sierra Juliet in his basement. And that satellite, the first amateur radio satellite, was launched in orbit in 1961. So amateur radio satellites have been around for a while. Many amateur radio satellites are different types of orbit, so how high they are above the Earth allows us to be able to talk to different people. So to dive in a little bit deeper, low Earth orbit, or LEO satellites, are about 2,000 in altitude, 2,000 kilometers in altitude, and they orbit about every 90 minutes, so you get multiple passes during the day. And as you can see on the left, that's JO97. It's one of our linear transponders, which I'll dive a little bit more deeper into later. But they orbit about every 90 minutes, as I said. Another orbit that a satellite could be in is medium Earth orbit, or MEO. It is between 2,000 kilometers and 35,000 kilometers in altitude. And as you can tell, the higher altitude allows you to talk with a wider range. So on the image, the section that's highlighted is anywhere you can talk to, and it's called the footprint. One thing with MEO is that the satellites that are in that orbit are in the Van Allen radiation belts, and this is a very harsh environment that cause electronics to be prone to glitch in this type of atmosphere. This is because the outer belt is made up of billions of high energy particles that originate from the sun, and in the inner belt, and as a result, there's an interaction with cosmic rays that cause problems and harsh environment for these satellites. So one amateur radio satellite that was launched was KE8RJU. That was launched on Vega C in July of 22, and currently it's still functioning and it's working great, and it's a digipeater, so we were able to talk very long distance. That launch had six CubeSats that were a payload, and several of them had amateur radio, but KE8RJU is the only one that is able to be used currently, just due to the harsh environment and the failing components on the other satellites. Another orbit is highly elliptical orbit, HEO. There hasn't been any satellites currently in that orbit. There hasn't been any recently. One satellite that wasn't HEO was AO13, but AO13 re-entered and burned up in 1996, so it's been a while, so AMSAT's working on getting back to HEO and higher. So this is a diagram just showing you in relation to the Earth how the orbits look. So LEO is smaller footprint, medium Earth orbit's a bigger footprint, and then highly elliptical orbit is even bigger. So the higher, the farther you'll be able to work, and the more DX entities you'll be able to contact. Another orbit that a lot of people talk about is geostationary satellites. This is an orbit that is above the middle of the equator, and it looks like the satellite is standing still. But unfortunately, the only satellite that's in GEO currently is KE100, and as you can see from the footprint, is almost only accessible in Europe and Africa and a bit of South America there. So that is a really interesting satellite that would be interesting to operate if I ever go to Europe. I was shocked when I found this out, but amateur radio satellites have a lot of frequencies allocated to them. Currently, most of the satellites use 2 meters and 70 centimeters, which are the main uplinks and downlinks. But one of our satellites, Alpha Oscar 7, has a downlink on 10 meters. That's a very interesting satellite that would take some studying and to understand how it works with the 10 meters. But it's really interesting, and sometimes you may hear someone on that frequency range using AO7. Also, as I mentioned, KE100, that uses it uplinks on 13 centimeters and it downlinks on 10 gigs, 3 centimeters. So the ones in bold are the current satellites that are being used. The other ones are allocated for amateur radio satellite use, but there's no satellites currently in those bands. Just to note, frequencies used by amateur radio satellites should be coordinated by the KE8RJU, just for to make sure that you're not interfering with the other satellites, and it's best practice. Satellites are typically cross-band. In some cases, like KE117, that is not cross-band, but most satellites are cross-band, meaning you transmit on one band and you receive on a different band. So mode B, VU, you would uplink on 70 centimeters and you would downlink on 2 meters. On the reverse, mode J, you would uplink on 2 meters and downlink on 70 centimeters. Crossband is meaning you transmit on one frequency and you receive on another. An example here is RS-44, where you transmit on 2 meters and you're receiving on 70 centimeters. Another important thing with satellite, and what makes it a lot more complicated, is the Doppler effect. Your frequency at your radio must be adjusted to compensate for the Doppler effect. As the satellite moves towards the max elevation, the received signal will appear to increase, and it moves towards the loss of signal, the frequency will appear to decrease. The opposite is true for the transmit side, and this is important, so the frequency at your transmit frequency at the satellite can remain constant. On the left is a photo from Scott K4KDR. He took a screenshot with his SDR. This shows how a satellite would be without being compensated for the Doppler effect. We all know that sound of the siren, the police siren, the fire truck, whatever it is, going by and the frequency changing. This is a real example of the Doppler effect, and how it works in everyday life. There are many types of amateur radio satellites, including linear transponders, FM repeaters, digital, and digital. An FM repeater you can think of like your local repeater, what you have a net on. However, when they're in their LEO orbit, they offer a larger area of coverage. Often these FM satellites are very fast-paced and have a quick exchange. There's a lot of people wanting to make contacts. The exchange on satellite is your grid square and your call sign, and you move on. It's very quick. It's almost like you're operating a contest. It's really quick. You got to move on. And that's why it's very important to listen, to start off listening and understanding what's going on, so you can pick up your speed. One thing to note is not to call CQ on FM satellites. People get really mad, and it's not something commonly done whatsoever. And it is important to let other stations complete their QSO before moving on. And this is also a case because there are many users trying to make contact on a given channel. And with LEO satellites, you normally only have about 10 minutes until the satellite is lost of signal. So you have to make your contacts really quick, and everyone else has to understand that they're also going to be losing the satellite as well soon. Some of the FM repeaters that we have currently today are AO91 and SO50. They are both very good FM repeaters. AO91 recently has been having, I think, some battery problems, so it's not as reliable, but most of our FM repeaters are pretty reliable there. Another type of mode is a linear transponder. You're able to operate sideband or CW on linear transponders. Linear transponders are often slower paced than FM satellites because you have a lot more space to spread out, and you don't have to be quick because you're not trying to complete your QSO so someone else can use the frequency. Typically on some satellites there's over 25 kilohertz to spread out, as if it was sort of a mini HF band, as I like to say. But even though it can be slow at some times, when there is a rare DX entity or a rare grid, it's very quick and you have to understand what's going on. The photo on the left is a screenshot from my radio, and it shows that there's several transmissions going on at a time, so each one in the waterfall is in separate contact happening at a separate time. So if I wanted to chat with my grandpa for the whole pass, I could, while someone else was working a rare grid square, or you can move, and it's really a little less chill. It's more chill, but you still have to understand that the satellite you'll be losing soon, and you have to understand how that works. Another satellite mode is digital. Currently, we have 3 digital satellites: IO-117, LED-SAT, and ISS data that are typically used. Currently, the ISS the digipeater, the APRS digipeater, is currently stowed, so it's not able to be used. We're not sure when that's going to be unstowed yet, but yeah. IO-117, that satellite, as I mentioned before, is in medium Mars orbit and allows you to be able to contact many stations and rare DX entities. That operates in 1200 baud. It does every once in a while operate in 300 baud, so it's a bit more complicated there. But a good way to know if the ISS digipeater is on is to go to just Google ARIS radio status, and it will be able to tell you the status of the data and the repeater that's on the board the space station. Both of those can run simultaneously, or one or the other. Currently, as I counted a few hours ago, we have 13 FM repeaters, 6 linear transponders, and 3 digital satellites. To note that they're not all on at the same time. Some of them are required to be commanded by a ground station. Some of them are depending on how much sunlight they're getting from the sun, and some are only on over certain regions. So as I've said, 13 FM repeaters, 6 linear transponders, and 3 digital satellites. One way to check if a certain satellite is on is going to AMSAT status, which is the QR code on the left, which is a crowdsourced website where people are able to submit data if they heard a specific satellite or not, so everyone can benefit and understand if their equipment is not working, or if the satellite was not on that particular pass. Satellite does require some specific equipment. One thing that is most important is to have full duplex. Full duplex means you're able to transmit and receive at the same time. So when you key down and you go through the satellite, you're able to hear your signal coming back. This is very important because there's many people on the satellite, and if you key the repeater and you're not making it, then no one's going to be able to make a contact. So some operators are using the ICOM 9700, which I'm currently using as my main satellite radio. But some other people are also using a TS2000, the 910, or the FT847s, which are all would be able to be used for FM, linear, and digital satellites. Some also other people use a pair of FT818s or 817s to be able to create full duplex so they can operate on FM and linear satellites. But if you want to get started on FM satellites, you will need a full duplex radio. Some mobile radios are full duplex, which is you might want to check into. And some HTs are full duplex, but very rarely are HTs full duplex. So one way to be able to create duplex would be to use two HTs to create full duplex. One you would have for your transmit and one for your receive. One person that has created a list of transceivers that are capable of full duplex is WD9EWK. This is also on his KE8RJU page. And it has a list of all the radios that are able to do full duplex, and some caveats if there's some models that aren't able to do full duplex. That is a very good resource to understand if your radio that you're thinking of using is full duplex or not. The type of antenna, you can get a big 2 meter, 70 centimeter Yagis like we have, but the more simple route is to go with an elk or an arrow antenna. A directional antenna is very valuable because you want all your RF to go towards the satellite, and so you have the max amount of power at the satellite. But to note that, as always, as limited power to be able to make the contact as possible. So predicting and tracking, you may be wondering, okay, I know all this stuff, I know the radio, I know the orbits, how do I know where they are? And that's something that I think about every day. A quick way I do it is using mobile phone apps, which are on the right. So SatSat, AMSat Droid, ISS Detector, and Heavens Above. I think SatSat, AMSat Droid, and Heavens Above are all free. ISS Detector, you can get the ISS for free, but the AMSat satellites you have to pay a bit more for. Another thing for predicting and tracking is being able to control your radio for the Doppler effect, and if you have a rotator, you're able to control that manually with the software as well. So some people are using Orbitron, Mac Doppler, SAT PC32, and the new CSN SAT controller box has been very popular with the portable operations, so they could just connect their radio, their ICOM radio, and their Yaesu G5500 rotator to that. It makes it pretty simple, and all of those have built-in applications that will able to predict future passes. There are also websites that if you Google AMSat satellite tracking, you are able to pull it up that way as well. So there's many ways to figure it out. If you have a question about that, feel free to reach out to me and I'm willing to help. There's many ways to find when the satellites are coming up. As I talked about before, the Doppler effect, and I mentioned using software to control your radio to adjust the Doppler effect. But if you're going the 2HT route, which is great, we were able to use that when I was up in Canada at Youth on the Air Camp. We were able to use the 2HTs, and that worked out really well. One way you're going to want to do that is you're going to want to program the 4 frequencies, the acquisition of signal, the halfway between acquisition of signal and the mid-pass, between LOS and the mid-pass and LOS. You'll be able to hear when it gets a bit scratchy. You'll be able to switch the memory. And KE0PBR, which is the QR code on the left, has a frequency chart that shows you what frequencies each satellite is and if it needs a tone or not. So a basic QSO would consist of the exchange is your grid square. So if you would hear me on a satellite pass, you would say KE8RJU, Whiskey 3, Lima, India, Fox, EN91. Then I would come back to you, and then I would say Whiskey 3, Lima, India, Fox, Kilo Echo 8, Radio Japan United, Echo November 62, QSL, and you would say QSL, Whiskey 3, Lima, India, Fox. And then your contact's done. It's very quick. Some of the stuff is added or subtracted. As long as you have the grid square exchange, that's the most important part, and that you both have then you have the verify the contact is complete. It is a 4-digit grid square. Some people do send the 6. The 4-digit grid square is what we exchange on amateur radio satellites. So there is a caveat to that. Sometimes when you're working a European pass, they'll send you their 6-digit grid square, and will sometimes send a 6-digit grid square back as well. That has to go back. There are many reasons why I'm passionate about amateur radio satellites. My very first ever contact was on a LEO satellite, RS-44, with my grandpa, and I was able to work him when he was there in Arizona operating for Stroke 60, and I just found it really cool that we were able to make contact, and we were both licensed at the same age as 15, so every time I contact him, it's just reminding me of my very first contact. And one reason why I like amateur radio satellites is a very fast pace, and LEO satellites, you have maybe a max of 10 minutes a pass, so I'm able to get back to my schoolwork, which is a big priority, or make HF contacts, or move on with other portions of the hobby while chasing satellite passes as well. My mom also likes it because we don't have to skip dinner as much. So when I started this hobby, I didn't really have any knowledge about amateur radio satellites, but my grandfather and my father have really built into me the understanding of listening and understanding what's going on before transmitting. And I just find that QSL card really neat, and I will always have a passion for amateur radio satellites because of the family heritage there. One of my favorite satellites, not because I make that many contacts on it, I've made 2 contacts on this satellite. It's because it's a very experimental satellite. Based on recent data, this AO109 only has an output power of 8 milliwatts, which is really, really low. And I'm able to experiment with this satellite and understand how I need to better my station, so I'm able to work a distant station on another satellite. Recently, I've been trying CW on the satellite. I was doing voice before and it was sounding really well, but the CW is really going through. So hopefully when my grandfather is back in Ohio, or if anyone wants to sked with me and has a high gain antenna system, AO109 is the satellite that I've been working with. And of course it's a challenge because it's so weak and you need to understand all of the amateur radio logic behind it. And it's helping me, as I said, better my station and understand where I have weak spots and what azimuths I have limitations in. Some of my takeaways is listening. Understand what's going on before transmitting. I really take that into any part of the hobby that I focus on, amateur radio satellites especially. Another thing that I've taken away is the fast-paced operation. This fast pace of operation has really helped me with my contesting ability and being able to understand a call sign coming to me and being able to relay it fast. And if I didn't copy, to quickly respond and say, give it to me again. So it's very fast paced. Don't be scared. Listen, there's tons of recordings out there. I can send you a recording if you like of a pass. And just get familiar with the cadence and speed. I found that the amateur radio satellite community is really kind and they're all really willing to make contacts. And my very first contact, I made my contact with my grandfather, and then I had 2 other people wanting to talk to me, and they were very sweet, and I talked to them very often, and they're very kind. Even though amateur radio satellite has my heart, amateur radio has given me tons of friendships and has allowed me to make friendships, and that is a very big part of amateur radio. Besides chasing awards, gaining new friendships and being able to learn from my fellow peers is really the part that I really enjoy. Tim, do we have time for questions?
we'll bring you the microphone and you can ask a question from Grace. Raise your hand if you have a question. So, Grace, the first time I heard you on the satellites was when Josh did a STEM camp over in Youngstown, and the first pass that we heard was KE8RJU, very, very close on the satellite path. And we said, she'll make a great content. And it led to this. So this is very cool. Grace, tell us about your plans after high school. What are you going to do for college?
Yeah, that's a great question. Currently, I haven't decided on a school. I'm still deciding between two schools. Very good schools. Both have either an amateur radio club really close or a club at the school that I'm really looking to get involved with. I will pursuing electrical engineering, so I'm really excited. Just as amateur radio has exposed me to RF and all the world of electrical engineering and problem solving, I've been really interested in that field, so I'll be going into that. Also, my engineering design class at my school really showed me that I really enjoy engineering, so that's what I'll be studying.
Great. And this May, will be professors at the 16th Contest University. So we're very excited about that. And several of you will attend Contest University and will be able to hear the presentation with Grace and Katie. And if you're not there, it will be broadcast on YouTube and live on Facebook. So, and it will be recorded as well. So you won't miss anything out. And very, very excited that two of the youngest professors for Contest University ever. So this is going to be a real treat. Somebody have a question for Grace? Well, Grace, it looks like you've
I think there's someone on
answered
Zoom.
everything.
Josh, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to ask.
John? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Can you hear me?
Josh?
Okay. Just wanted to ask real quick, and you don't have to go too deep into the weeds with this, but what kind of equipment is on the satellites? I'm just kind of curious at that because I know we talked about on ground, but up in orbit, I'm curious. I mean, I look it up, but I'm just see what.
Yeah, I understand that. I personally have not gotten too involved with the engineering side of it, which I would love to get involved with that. I should talk with Jerry over at AMSAT to see what I can do to help. But actually, many of the satellites that they're launching nowadays, not really hardware-wise, but they're CubeSats. They're really small, and they put solar panels on them, and not really sure exactly the hardware-wise. But I know AMSAT is also working on an LTM, which I'm not exactly sure what that stands for, but it works with other schools to be able to put their amateur radio payload on the CubeSat, so we're able to have an amateur radio satellite as well as the school's able to do their experience as well. If you have any other questions, John, feel free to email me, or I can help you with a bit more if you would like.
Awesome, thank you.
So, Grace, if you had to say, how many contacts have you made on the satellite?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I know I just got over 10,000 contacts in Logbook of the World, but that does include HF as well. I think I just worked my 989th grid square today, so yeah.
So how many more grid squares till you have all the grid squares in the U.S.?
Well, for the U.S., I have, damn it, I think I have 11 more, which it's pretty hard. I know it's winter right now, so I have to wait till the spring. I'm hoping before I graduate that I'll have them all. That's the goal. But
Wow. And you said that you have VXCC, so we know you have 100 countries, but how many countries do you really have?
so I have 100. Okay, so I have 101 confirmed. I worked 2 new ones today, actually. Clipperton Tango X-Ray 5 Sierra is on Green Cube, IL-117 satellite, so I was able to work them, and they've actually already uploaded, so that's pretty nice. So I'm up to 103 worked so far.
What was the other country you worked today that was new?
I didn't work it today. I worked it the other day. I worked PJ4.
Okay, so that's Bonaire, right?
Yeah, that's Bonaire.
Yep. I lost your audio. Yeah. That's Bonaire? Now you're muted.
Yeah, that's right. I think I'm causing the echo, so that's, yeah.
Okay, great. And so a lot of folks here have worked Clipperton. So did they attract a lot of callers on the satellite?
Yeah, I was expecting it to be a lot busier than it was, but I think they made over 300 satellite contacts so far. They're really working for Asia and Europe. Those are the hard ones to get right now. I know my mom, who's a rare contact to get, worked them. So, yeah, they'll be there several more days, and it's pretty chill. Grandpa's worked them, so it's really not that hard if you have the equipment and the persistence.
That's very cool. And your mother's call is KE8RJU, right?
Yeah, that her initials. Yeah.
And so KE8RJU was a member of this club. It was Chuck Paddock, who was also W8AOO before that. But so we have some experience with KE8RJU here in the Mercer County Amateur Radio Club. So now your mom has that call, and the KE8RJU from this club is a silent key. But so we have a connection with you. Last chance for questions for Grace. Over to Don.
Yes, Grace, Don, N6JRL. My question is, in addition to your satellite communications, have you ever had the opportunity to work with a contact with the ISS?
Yes, I have. I've actually been very fortunate to personally work the ISS several times from my home station, but I also was able to be a part of an ARIS contact as the control operator for the W8 India Sierra Sierra at the West Michigan Aviation Academy, where the students were able to ask questions. So I was able to work with my father and some other hams in the local area to provide those students able to make contact. Also, at Yoda Camp, Katie and I and the rest of the campers were able to talk to the astronaut there as well. So I've had a lot of contacts with the astronauts. Currently, I don't think there's any astronauts currently that are making too many repeater contacts, if any, so far. But the last contact before the camp I was able to make was right after Dayton.
So, Katie, have you kept track of how many astronauts you worked? Worked all astronauts. No, I'm sorry, Grace. Grace, have you kept track of the astronauts?
Let me think. I think there's 4. I have my QSL card over with my QSL. My first one was with Kjell Lindgren while he was on the International Space Station. And then Koichi Wasada was the astronaut for the ARIS contact. And then Josh Schaffner, I think, was the astronaut right after Dayton. And then I don't recall the astronaut's name from Yoda Camp. So 5.
Very nice. Well, it's been a real treat, Grace, to have you here this evening and to have your good friend Katie in the audience as well. And we've enjoyed every minute of it. And we look forward to seeing you and your family at Hamvention, along with Katie and the two of you together, spreading the word and showing that there are young people in this hobby, doggone it, and they're really, really smart. And they know the code too. That's what's really cool about it. So thanks again, Grace, and tell your father hello.
I'll tell my father and grandfather hello from you.
All right. Thanks again. Get back to studying.
Yeah, I start second semester tomorrow. We had an ice day, no school because of the roads were really bad. So, yeah.
Back to work. Okay. 73, Grace. All right. We're headed up till